Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Taking Names. This is my playthrough of Elden Ring and we are very close to the end now. We have just a couple of legacy dungeons remaining, this one and also Crumbling Farum Azula. And you might have noticed that I'm just doing the legacy dungeons now. I did quite a lot of the open world areas in Limgrave and Loretta the Lakes and Caelid, but I do want to focus in on the legacy dungeons now that we are close to the end of the game, and we're just going to quickly finish off the rest of this game and then move on to other types of Elden Ring content. This opening section of the Haligtree is a great area for farming those envoy enemies because they only take a couple of hits and they're going to give you about 2,500 or 3,000 runes. So that's a great section to do some late game farming as long as you don't fall out of the tree. This section just before the boss, there aren't too many difficult enemies, so this is a really nice and easy section as well. There is this one rather difficult enemy, but you can kind of cheese him off with a bow and arrow first before taking him out with melee attacks. These Crystalline enemies actually take a lot of hits initially before they eventually stagger and then you can do more damage to them. And they're actually quite difficult to fight if you have more than one of them. So here there's about 3 of them and it's a very difficult fight if you're trying to fight them 3 versus 1. But what you actually have to do is there is this snail enemy there that is conjuring up this Crystalline enemy, so you need to take out that and you just have to search around the level to find them, and once you take those out then the Crystalline enemy disappears straight away. About halfway through the Haligtree there is a boss fight. This is Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree, and it's very similar to the boss that you fought in Caria Manor, except this time it's not the spirit form, it's the human form. Now she pretty much has the same attacks as the one in Caria Manor, and I don't know if she's any more difficult than that. It certainly didn't feel like it, although I have to admit that I'm much more over leveled now than I was back then, and that wasn't a particularly difficult boss fight back then, and I'm showing you the whole boss fight right now and it's probably less than a minute. And I gotta say, I think part of why there have been some complaints about the Elden Ring boss fights is that I do think that people think they're a little bit short, especially when you're playing through this legacy dungeon for a couple of hours exploring the whole level and then the boss fight is just a minute long. But once you get past Loretta, you do get rewarded with a very nice area for farming runes again. And this section here, there's a lot of very placid enemies that don't really do anything, that are just staring out into the distance or sitting down and not doing much, and they can reward you with around 2,000 to 3,000 runes for each enemy, and in just about 5 minutes you can pick up about 50,000 runes. So this is a very good section that is not too repetitive either, because if you were to farm in Mogwin Palace, that could get quite repetitive pretty quickly, even though you can get 40,000 in a couple of minutes. Here it might take a little bit longer, but I do think that is a little bit more enjoyable, and I do think that it is a little bit easier than the Albinorics, because those Albinorics you can just roll off the edge when you're trying to dodge them. Once you get sick of farming those soldiers, you can move on to other enemies like this Elphael avatar here. Now I tried to snipe him from the top of this tower and I don't think that was a good strategy, because it might have taken me 10 maybe 15 minutes to finish him off with a bow and arrow, whereas if you just went down and meleeed him it would probably take you a couple of minutes at best. So I think that's probably the way to go. And this midsection here with that Elphael avatar is actually quite long, and I was trying to find a site of grace because I'd run out of Flask of Crimson Tears, and so I didn't want to lose all my runes that I had accumulated up to this point. And you can see that throughout the level there's a lot of light sources that can mislead you to think that they're sites of grace, and I was really stuck for trying to find a site of grace, but luckily I decided to just look and see what was behind this Elphael avatar, And I just happened to stumble across a site of grace just in time before this enemy killed me off. So when I respawned, I actually was able to pick up my runes right there. Now, this Haligtree avatar area is actually kind of difficult because there are these two other knights standing there as well. So what I decided to do was just cheese him through this archway and just fire some arrows at him, because I didn't want to fight the Haligtree avatar and lose and then have to fight those knights over and over again. I did that a couple of times and then it got really annoying, and I just found just finishing him off with a bow and arrow was just the easiest way to make sure I didn't have to fight those knights again. The Haligtree is a really large dungeon. It might not be as big as Leyendell, but there must be at least 7 or 8 sites of grace in the Haligtree. And here is yet another section where it just feels like the Haligtree just keeps on going, where there's a Scarlet Rot waterfall. And we're getting very close to the boss fight here, but there is still a lot of content, and you're going to have to go into this church, and there is an area all around the church as well, full of enemies that you can fight. But once you've had enough fighting all of those regular enemies, you can make your way down that lift and find the final boss fight of the level, which is Malenia, Blade of Miquella, which is a very much hyped boss fight. And some people have said that this is the most difficult boss fight in the game. And certainly I think if you were to fight Malenia one-on-one, this is a pretty difficult boss fight. She has a lot of interesting attacks, some very difficult attacks to avoid. And she also has some interesting status effects as well. Like, for example, when she hits you, she'll recover some of her health back. So here she's releasing her, what I would call her 3-phase combo, which is probably her most deadly attack. And you've got to avoid 2 or 3 of those phases of the combo. Otherwise, she can definitely one-shot you if you just stand there and take all those hits. And not only that, because once she hits you, she also recovers some of her health back. So that 3-hit combo can be quite devastating. As with many of the Elden Ring bosses, it seems like they have 2 phases, and this first phase of Malenia, she is not that difficult. So this is the time really where you want to be just trying to finish her off as quick as you can, because that's going to keep your Mimic tier alive, and that way the Mimic tier can help you out in the second phase. But also you want to keep as many health potions as you can for the second phase, because in the second phase you end up having a lot more dangerous attacks which can one-shot you. So you want to keep your health up in that stage and just use your health potions more liberally. And once you deplete all of her health, then she will move into her second phase. I do find it interesting that some characters move into their second phase after 50% health, and some characters move into a second phase after all of their health is depleted. But nevertheless, I don't think it really matters. It's all about like how many hit points they have anyways. So in Malenia's second phase, she has some other attacks, like that Scarlet Bloom attack that you just saw that also produces Scarlet Rot. But I would say the biggest change is that she's a lot more agile. So if you were to fight her one-on-one, she can move around the area a lot easier. And so if you have a summon like I have here with the Mimic tier attacking her and being able to interrupt her attacks, that just makes the whole fight a lot easier. So I think if you were to fight her one-on-one, this fight would actually be a lot tougher, because she would be a lot harder to hit. So while Malenia has a couple of those unique abilities like being able to replenish her health with her attacks, and also she has a 3-phase combo which could easily wipe out many characters, I think if you can avoid that attack, then the fight isn't too hard. But there you go, Malenia is defeated, and that's going to do it for this episode. So if you've enjoyed this series, make sure to click the like button, also to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.